It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview a sports podcast called It Is Case. How are y'all doing today?
Very good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you got started with your podcast?
So it was a great honor to get invited by you for your podcast today. So we appreciate that first off.
Thank you.
And we started the podcast we talk sports, we talk football, basketball, and try to do bets and stuff, right? But the way it started was we're just two high school kids arguing sports, debating, and that's where our passion comes from.
Exactly. And another thing is, I'm from New Jersey, and I kind of like all the New York teams, including the Nets, Giants in particular, and Kunal is a very big Philadelphia fan. So we always would argue between the two regions, who would have the better teams and who would have the better players.
That's pretty cool. What segments do you cover in Cases Sports?
So one of our main segments is the draft segment, where we would fictionally create a draft of fantasy players. And then at the end of that draft, we'd debate who would have the better team or overall roster.
So like, for example, we'd be like, okay, so there's we'd be in a group of friends, right? So this is how, I'll tell you how it started. We'd be sitting in a group of friends and we'd be like, yo, NBA playoffs are here. Let's take the players in the playoffs and let's just do a draft. Like, you got first pick, I got second pick, this person got third pick. And at the end of it, we try to see who got the better team. So that's where it started. And then we were just like, oh, we can make this a segment. It's pretty original. And that's where it started.
And sometimes we'd even take the draft to NBA 2K or like Madden.
Yeah. So like we'd go out like with our friends or boys, and then we'd do this draft. And afterwards be like, okay, let's go to this person's house. And we could do a 2K tournament with these teams. So like, it's just like fun and games and like, it's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool that you use 2K to border your podcast. What are some other segments that you cover in your podcast?
So some other segments we've tried in the past include the pause segment, where if there's any any kind of topic in sports that kind of goes under the radar, if we wanted to give more detail about it, we would say pause. If we didn't want to really talk about it or we wanted to move on from that, we would say move on from the cause.
What are some of your popular people that you've interviewed? I've seen that you've interviewed like an NBA, an MLB player.
Yeah. So recently we just interviewed Connor Green, pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. And that was a great experience because we don't really cover baseball that much. But like we know, like we watch baseball, we follow baseball, but we don't really talk about it on our podcast. So interviewing a baseball player and seeing his side of it, like it was a great experience. And prior to that, another professional player we interviewed was Tate Davis, from the former player for the New York Giants and now for the Cleveland Browns.
How do you go about getting people in the famous like that?
So honestly, like you just gotta push through and grind. Like you just gotta contact these players. And like the thing with a lot of these big players is they don't check their DMs. So you try to see, like, a lot of them have their emails on and the email leads to their agent. So we just shoot a text to their agent and just reach out to them and try to tell them what we do and hope they like what we do.
Have y'all had it to deal with, like, I don't know if y'all have done any, like, college coaches, but have y'all had it to deal with any compliance officers?
Never had an issue with compliance or anything. But another guest that I do want to mention that we had was a sports doctor who is in a residency right now. And he's very famous on YouTube with almost 200,000 subscribers. His name is Dr. Brian Suderer. And, he tweets on a lot of the sports injuries, and it makes it very easy and understandable for the average sports fan to understand, like, what's really going on when, Ben Simmons,
gets hurt, or like any player gets hurt, like he's on it. And like, hearing his side of it was like a different perspective for us, because we always see from the athlete's perspective, like as fans, but like him as a doctor, like it just shows, like when we talked to him before like the NBA return, we talked about how like the injuries were gonna how the injuries were gonna do, and he said it's gonna be pretty much the same because players are coming back from a break. So like it's just different perspectives.
And of course, with the pandemic going on right now, it was very good to see his perspective and how it could be successfully implemented to have sports back in our world.
Speaking about the NBA returning, do y'all have like segments on y'all's YouTube where y'all talk about like predictions of who will make the championship rounds?
Yeah, so we don't have a segment per se. We just have like a part of like we because we debate a lot and we try to talk about like sports. So we'll talk about like who's gonna win this series. So like we recently did a bracket for like a free contest for our viewers to partake in. It was these masks were given out. We're giving out a free mask for whoever predicted the series correctly for the NBA playoffs.
Can you talk more about giving away things like and how that worked for your viewers?
So we kind of had a series for the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, and they have to predict who's going to win in 4 for every single series. And whoever is the most accurate, as well as in the correct amount of games, will get a total score that reflects who is the most accurate. And at that point, that person will get the mask.
Yeah. So I feel like it's like it's a good relationship with our audience because like if we do little giveaways, little like on our Instagram, we do a poll every day. And like little things like that, I feel like it's a good way to engage our audience and like keep them engaged and keep them feeling like they're part of this thing with us. Because what are we without our audience, you know?
Exactly.
That's pretty good. What are some of y'all's future plans for the podcast?
So we're just trying to keep growing, keep interviewing different athletes, trying to see what they do, and just keep grinding.
Exactly. We're just trying to keep growing and seeing who we can connect with. We love that we got the opportunity to talk with you,
Mhm.
other fellow sports podcasters, fellow athletes, anybody involved in the sports realm is who we want to connect with and really engage our audience with.
That's pretty good that you reach out to other people. What advice would you give upcoming sports talk podcasts that are getting into the sports talk podcast just like you and just like me?
So one thing for me personally was you got to be passionate about what you're talking about. Like if you love sports, you could easily like make this you can make this a career. Like for us, like we love sports and we're like passionate about it. So every day when we record, we love doing it. So first, that's the number one thing. You got to love what you're doing. Number two is like in the beginning, early stages is gonna be tough. Like you gotta make sure you overcome that. Like initially, you're gonna only have like 5 listeners, 10 listeners, but then eventually that 10 is gonna become 100. 100 is gonna become 500. It just keeps growing.
And not even to say that we're at that point yet, but the very first initial hurdle that is very tough for anybody with a certain idea or something they want to offer is to just go out and do it. Once you first can go out and do it, even if it's a bad product at first, you have to keep having that mentality of let's improve from each episode to each episode. So as long as you start somewhere and just do it, you can always improve and get better. And at that point, you got to be passionate about what you do.
Exactly. And like for us, like I'll give an example. Like we started off just doing Apple podcast. Oh, not even Apple. We weren't in Apple in the beginning. We were just on Anchor and Spotify. And then we got the Apple and YouTube. And then we started using our Instagram page. And now we're selling masks. So you just keep taking a step forward every day, every week. Just keep moving up.
Can you talk about when it comes to content, like where do y'all brainstorm on what y'all cover?
So one thing that we get a lot of our content from is that we have a group chat, right, on Instagram with a lot of our friends, and we just talk about sports on there every day. And that's kind of where some of the ideas start off. And at that point, it's just taking those ideas and putting it putting it to paper or to the internet, pretty much.
Like even like our draft segment, for example, it came from like doing it with our friends. And like another segment we've done in the past, it's like a kill Mary hookup version of quarterback. So it's start, bench, or cut. So it's like kill Mary hookup. We used to do this back in the day when we were growing up, and now we made it a segment on our podcast. So like little things like that, like there's so many ideas in your head that you don't like actually implicate, but like if you actually put your mind to it and your thought to it, like it's a solid idea.
And with those ideas, if you put it to paper, or in this case to the internet or electronically, that's where your ideas can really flourish.
And like one more thing, we're always open for suggestions. Like we talk to people, we try to see what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, what we could do better, and what we're doing perfect. So like it's just trying to improve every day.
And every episode we come out, we send it to people. Listen to it if you can. Tell us what you think, we could do better, what we did well, and that's kind of where we try to have our advice come from.
That's great. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
So we have an Instagram called It's Case Podcast, ITSKS Podcast, and then we're also on Twitter. And like Instagram's mostly where we do like our polls and our like bet of the days. Like I have like a segment called Kunal's Bet of the Day, like because I'm a huge like I love betting, right? And like usually I'm making money off of it, so I like to give our viewers like my tip, my bet of the day.
That's wonderful. Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck in your future with your podcast. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.
Pleasure speaking to you today.
Yeah, and best of luck on this grind we're on together.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.